In this video, I am going to demonstrate how to do some embroidery. Very simple stitches on a little throw pillow. I have a Latvian symbol that we're going to embroider onto the pillow. My name is Dana Harris Seeger, and this is my Baltic handmade life. So here I have this little pillow that I am kind of tired of, so I'm going to cover it with this fabric, and I want to do a pattern. I'll do something on that one too, but I want to do some embroidery kind of like this. And I did this pillow with some Estonian symbols, so I want to do Latvian symbols for this pillow. And this is all just a very simple back stitch, which I'm going to show you, and some French knots. So it's going to be super simple, super quick, and gives the pillow a whole new life. So here are my supplies. Obviously I have my fabric, which I just measured around the pillow that I was going to be covering, and I try to give myself 1/2 inch to 1 inch of seam allowance so that when I stitch the pillow pieces, these two pieces together, that it's not going to be so tight. So I'm only going to embroider on the top one, so I don't need that. And this is my design. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And then I've got some different types of yarn or embroidery thread. This is wool yarn. It's really thin. It's like a fingering weight, which I really like because it's kind of puffy. And that's what I did this one with. And you can see that the design really stands out. This one's a little bit thinner. This is a pearl cotton. It's embroidery thread, 4-ply maybe, twisted together. So it's a really nice, smooth, mercerized cotton thread. It's not going to stand out quite as much as the wool yarn will, but it's really easy to work with, and it comes in different thicknesses. And then this is kind of standard embroidery thread made by DMC, and you can see that this is 6-ply. So each of this strand is actually made up of 6 different threads. So you can pull them apart if you wanted some skinnier threads, if you didn't want it that thick, or you could use it with all 6 of them. So I'm probably going to use this just because I can get it pretty nice and thick, and it's mercerized cotton, so it's nice and smooth. And the other thing you have to think about is what you're sewing onto. With this one, I was able to use the wool because the fabric itself was pretty open weave. So as the needle went in, the thick yarn could go through easily. But because this is pretty tight weave, it's just a linen, I want to use something a little bit skinnier. So I'm going to use the DMC. And then the other thing is which needle you're going to use. So if I was going to do like the wool yarn, I'd probably use this big tapestry needle. But again, it's going to be hard for that to go through the this tightly woven fabric without making a giant hole. So instead, I'm going to choose a needle that has a wide enough eye that my thread can go through easily without me having to fumble with it, but then something that's skinny enough that's going to easily go through the fabric. So I think this is it. Put those aside. And then some people like to embroider using an embroidery hoop. which keeps the fabric taut. You simply unscrew and loosen up the outer ring. You put the inner ring underneath the fabric, and then you place the outer ring on top and sort of squeeze it over, and you can see that it keeps it nice and taut so that as you're embroidering, you're not pulling the fabric or twisting it or getting it out of shape. But the problem is that because I want the design to be on the whole pillow, I would have to do it in sections. So I'm probably going to skip the embroidery hoop this time. If I was doing a smaller area or just one motif, I'd probably do that. All right, so now I have my needle, I have my thread. The next thing I want to do is get my design onto the pillow. Onto the fabric, I should say. So chalk markers are pretty good for this. They come in a variety of styles and sizes. And if you have a white chalk marker or chalk pencil, they're good for dark fabrics. This is blue, and it's good for lighter fabrics. And it just draws out a little blue line onto your fabric. But again, since this is kind of dark, I'm not going to use that. I generally just use a pen or a pencil. If it's a lighter fabric, I'll use a pencil. If it's a darker fabric, I'll use a pen. So I'm going to put something behind the pillow. And if you're picky, you can use a ruler to measure the center. You can use a pin too, or you can just sort of crease it with your fingers. Now I know where the center is. You can do that same thing. So there's my center. I could mark it with a pin. I could mark it with my needle. But now I know where the center of my design is going to be. So right about there. Like I said, I'm going to enlarge this so that it fits the same scale. But these are a few of the symbols for the father deity in Latvia. So they're called the Dieva Zima. Diev's like God, and Zima is symbol. So I'm going to, let's see, there's my center. So I'm going to make a little triangle, sort of a tall triangle. So there's 4 triangles, and I'm going to start it here. Just make a triangle. You're going to be embroidering over this, so you don't have to worry too much. If you have a disappearing ink pen, that works really well too. And then I've got my 3 little circles. I could draw in the detail if I wanted to, or I could just do that while I was embroidering. So there's one. Then the next one is over here like this. And then he doesn't go all the way up. It kind of goes like that. And then up to that line. Okay. And like that. This one. Again, I don't want to go too close to the edge because that's where my seam allowance is. And this one has a little circle. Another little circle. I'll show you how to do the little circle. Make it easier. And then some lines. All right. Last one. Like I said, this is a very simple motif. Kind of up to here. Some fabrics are a little bit stretchier than others, so just be careful as you're working that your design doesn't get distorted. And I'm simplifying some of these. I'm not doing quite as many lines because I want the design to stand out instead of being super accurate. So, there are my 4 Dieva Zimas. Now it's time to thread my needle. So I draw out a length of embroidery thread. I try to make it maybe 3 feet to 4 feet long. That way it's I can handle it. And then I just wet the tip so that it's nice and smooth and straight. Thread the needle. And then you'll see how it's twisting. So after you get it pulled through the needle, I just kind of run it through my hands a couple times and let it unravel itself. And then to make the world's easiest knot, you loop it, hold it between your thumb and your forefinger, loop it around your forefinger, and then where the end is, I just kind of push my 2 fingers together, and it creates this little knot. I don't mind putting a knot on this because I'm not going to see the back, but if I was going to do like a garment or something that I would see the back, I would probably leave the end longer and then just weave it back in so that it didn't have a bump and you couldn't see this sort of messy knot. Some people like to do that. All right, so let's kind of zoom in and I'll show you the basic back stitch. Okay, so I've got my embroidery thread, I've got my pattern, and the first, it doesn't really matter where you start because you'll be moving this around all over the place as you stitch, but just get into a comfortable position to sit. And then the first thing I'm going to do is take it from underneath, find my starting point, poke it up, and then pull it through till I feel the needle or the knot. And then the first stitch for the back stitch, I'm just going to outline this guy, is to go about, I guess, 1/4 of an inch and poke the needle down. And then you're going to, without pulling it all the way through, you're going to try to make another 1/4 inch space and poke the needle back out. So you're always trying to work on the top. If you pull down and pull up and pull down and pull up, you'll be wasting energy and stitching time. So now I've got a stitch and then a gap, and my thread is peeking out of the top. So to do a back stitch, I'm just going to poke the needle down through the hole that the first stitch went in. So I'm going backwards, and I'm going to poke it up 1/4 of an inch underneath. So on the back side, these stitches will be longer than these stitches. It'll look like just little bumps. And then you pull it through. Carefully you don't get any of that. So hopefully, once you get the hang of it, each one of these stitches will be the same length. And then you just keep doing it. You go poke it in, and then you're just walking along that line that you made, sticking the needle out 1/4 inch ahead. So you're going like 2 steps forward underneath, 1 step back, 2 steps forward underneath, 1 step back. I'll show you on the back side what it looks like. See? so it looks a little bit longer on the back. And on the front, you see these nice even little stitches. So once again, we're going to go down into that hole that the last stitch made, and then come up, hopefully the same distance, about 1/4 of an inch. Oops, if it gets a little knot, you can just gently pull it. That's why I try not to work with too long of thread. It tends to knot up. So when you want to change direction, so now I'm going to be going to the circle part. All I do is I go back down into that to complete the back stitch, and then I can start on a new line. Go back in. If it's a curve, it's a really tight curve, then what I do is try to make slightly smaller stitches so that it's not so like obvious that it's not a total curve. And then to do these little loops, I'm going to do, so instead of going under, you know, forward 2, 1 back, I'm just going to come out right where that last stitch was. So now I have, and the bottom is right where that little loop needs to be. I'm going to make a loop, kind of lay my thread like that in a little loop shape. I'm going to poke it down into that hole that I just came up out of. But instead of just pulling it through, which would make it kind of go all the way back down, I'm going to poke it out right at the top of the circle. Right where the circle, making sure that my needle is over this. And I'm going to trap it in there. I'm not going to pull it super tight, but you can see that now I've got a little loop that's kind of anchored there with this thread. So to keep that one from coming out, I'm just going to go down on the other side of the loop. And then I can come out at another beginning of another loop. That's called a lazy daisy. So you make a little loop, you go back down where you first came in, that stitch right there, you go up the very top of the circle and make sure the needle is over the loop. And pull it through very loosely, and then back down on the other side of the loop. And then I can come out as if I was going to do my next back stitch. So usually what I like to do is outline, but sometimes you'll have to kind of see, maybe it'll be more advantageous to do the stitches as you go, so they don't have to go back around. I like to try to be economical with my stitching, and you know, if I don't want to keep going back and forth and back and forth, so I try to do as much as I can while I'm there in those particular areas. So I'm going to finish this one and then keep going on these stripes, and it's all going to be in that backwards back stitch. So now I'm going to finish, when I run out of thread, I'm going to finish the Finish off my line of stitching by turning it to the back side, making a little loop and just a single knot, and then I'm weaving in the strands so that they lay flat, and I can trim the thread very close to the stitching and it won't unravel. So when we're done with our embroidery, then we want to put the pillow pieces together and then put the pillow in it. So what I'm going to do is put these pieces right sides together, which means that the embroidery, the nice side of the embroidery is going to be on the inside, and the yucky part is going to be on the outside. And then we're going to place the back side of the pillow on top, and if it had, you know, a right side, then you would want that to face the good side of the embroidery, with the back side on the outside, so that when we turn it inside out, all the seam allowances are on the inside, hidden. And usually I put a zipper in my pillows, but since this is just going to be a little throw pillow, I'm probably not going to wash it that much, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then what I want to do is make sure that there's a big enough space in one of the sides so that I can stuff the pillow into it. So I'm going to start by pinning. Let's see, there. And this is just my guide. So remember, I left maybe a little bit bigger seam allowance. So stitch the pieces together. This is about 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I'm not going to come all the way here again because I want to make sure that I can stuff the pillow in, and I'm just going to stitch around it. So I'm just going to use a regular foot and my needle over far enough to the left so that I can line it up with the 5/8 inch seam allowance. And start stitching. I'm using a black thread because I want the thread to be as dark or darker than the fabric so that it disappears. If it's too light, you might see it on the other side. A little back stitch to secure those stitches, because again, remember, I'm going to leave this open. Drop my needle, oops, drop my needle, pivot, that's a little too far away, pivot, now I'm at 5/8. And I'm going to pivot, keeping it in line with the 5/8 inch measurement. Go the needle down. You can also do it manually by turning the needle over here. And then I'm going to stop right there. And back stitch. Okay, next step. So after I've gotten a little tip is to trim your corners so that they don't get all bulky. And I do it right up to the stitching without actually cutting through the stitching. So here is our little pillow. Needs to go into this case. So we're going to turn this inside out or right side out. And when you poke out the corners, if you've trimmed them, then you'll see that you can get them nice and pointy. Otherwise they'll have all this bulk, which isn't good. Okay. If there's any stray threads, you can pull those out. I'll trim those too. Probably just cut that. Alright, so there's my little pillowcase. I'm going to stuff the pillow inside. Okay. Stuff the corners in. Okay. Now I've got this open part that I need to stitch up. So I'm just going to do that by hand to make a nice clean seam to match the rest of the pillows. If you want a tighter fit, if you want your pillow to be really tight, then you could turn it back inside out and make the seam allowances a little bit larger. So if you stitch to the inside just a little bit, then the pillow will be tighter. And you want to do that before you stitch up your side. But what I'm going to do now is use a mattress stitch or a ladder stitch and just stitch up that seam by hand, and then my pillow will be done. Okay, so first I'm going to get a piece of thread that just about approximates color. Use my small embroidery needle to thread it, and then I'm just going to make a same type of knot that we did for the embroidery. And then going to start at the right side and move, because I'm right-handed, I'm going to move to the left. So I want to keep it kind of tucked in like that. And I don't want you to see my knot. So I'm going to tuck it in like that. And then to do a ladder stitch or a mattress stitch, oops, you just stick it in one side and kind of run it just under the fold, and then after you poke it up, you grab a little bit of that other side And it makes this nice little invisible. Make sure you grab that.